Hello, I'm your reader Mary, here with you today with the New Bedford Standard Times. Today is January 7th, 2025. Let's start with the weather. We'll have a windy day with plenty of sunshine, a high of 30 and a low of 20. Wednesday will be sunny, breezy, and cold, a high of 30, a low of 16. Thursday, sunny to partly cloudy, high again of 30, low of 23. Friday will still be sunny, but not as cold, a high of 41 and a low of 19. Saturday will have intervals of clouds and sunshine, a high of 36 and a low of 27. Let's go to the front page. Our first front page story is from Frank Mulligan of the Standard Times out of New Bedford. It's called Truly One of My Literary Heroes. Herman Melville's life-size statue will adorn Bedford's historic Seamen's Bethel, where the author stopped before going out to sea, and which was the inspiration for the whaleman's chapel in his literary masterpiece, Moby Dick. Mayor John Mitchell announced on Friday that the sculptor Stephanie Rock 41 prominent artists who had applied to the city to undertake the work. Mitchell announced the effort to erect the statue last January. Rocknack is recovering from COVID, but managed to attend the announcement at the Bethel Chapel via Zoom. She jumped at the chance to do the sculpture, she said, having been fascinated by Melville since she was an undergraduate. The sculpture was inspired by a passage from Moby Dick. Quote, "This project is really meaningful to me. To create a sculpture of truly one of my literary heroes in the city that inspired his greatest work is truly an honor, so thank you. New Bedford is indisputably at the heart of Moby Dick, the place where Melville's transformative journey began." Her winning concept came to her after she read Moby Dick, and specifically the sermon offered up in the Whaleman's Chapel about Jonah and the whale. "When I learned the sculpture would stand next to the Seamen's Bethel, I knew I had to connect the iconic sermon." She said her sculpture depicts Melville standing beside 3 towering whale ribs among swirling waters, symbolizing his journey into and out of the whale. His mouth is open as if he's emerging to tell the story of Moby Dick and New Bedford. She said her work is titled Melville and Jonah's Journey. Her previous work includes a statue of Poe in Boston. Rocknack's previous work includes, quote, Poe returning to Boston. It's a life-size statue of Edgar Allan Poe located in Boston and a model of the Venus Lespoug for artist Robert Morris, which was enlarged and permanently installed in the Gori collection in Fattoria delle Pistoia, Italy, according to a press release. Other venues to feature her work include the Smithsonian, the Grolier Club in New York, the Tampa Museum of Art, and the windows of Saks Fifth Avenue in New York. She received a bachelor's degree from Colby College in American Studies, Art, and Art History, and a doctorate in philosophy from Boston University. She is currently chair and professor of philosophy at Hartwick College in Oneonta, New York. Her website is steffrocknak.net. That's steffrock.net. Mitchell said a committee of city artists, historians, and officials sifted through the applications. 4 finalists were each given $2,500 to create an image of their proposed work. Rocknack's work stood out among the rest in the way it conveyed some of the universal themes of Moby Dick. It also reflected its New Bedford setting. This isn't about tourism, although, frankly, we'll take every tourist willing to come to New Bedford and spend money here. But this is fundamentally a way of New Bedford proclaiming its identity, proclaiming something great about its past, and showing off to the world that this is an important place. Not just now, but in the long history of the United States, Mitchell said. The estimated budget is about $300,000, he said, and will be funded through donations raised by the New Bedford Port Society, up to $50,000, and through the Community Preservation Act. It will take about 12 to 15 months to complete, with a tentative unveiling set for early 2026. Donations can be made through the New Bedford Port Society. The city reached an agreement with the society to locate the statue on the Bethel grounds in August. It's going to go right here on Johnny Cake Hill, featured prominently, Mitchell said. The Seaman's Bethel is a special place, he said. It's not only the inspiration for the Whalemen's Chapel, but it's also a shrine to New Bedford's maritime history, whalemen, and fishermen lost at sea. Philip Oliveira, New Bedford Port Society president, said the Bethel was built in 1832. So it's been here for 192 years, celebrating events like this. But its main mission is to commemorate the loss of our fishermen at sea. Oliveira pointed out the pew where Melville once sat in the rear of the chapel, which has been labeled for visitors. He said, we have been relevant throughout our history. The Bethel is a clear example of that. New Bedford Fiber Arts shop opens. Growing up surrounded by women who would constantly crochet or knit, it was no surprise that Blaine Baccioli would become an artist herself. And now she has a business in downtown New Bedford dedicated to helping other local artists grow their craft. I have always been a maker and a creative person, said Baccioli. My mother did basket weaving when I was a young child. My aunt is a painter. I grew up around a lot of very creative women, and I would say they really inspired me in my early days. She went on to study at the Art Institute of Boston and Lesley College, now known as Lesley University College of Art and Design. She honed her skills and eventually became an art teacher. However, during the recession, Baccioli found herself struggling to find teaching jobs and took a break. After my last teaching position, I needed something else. I was just so burnt out and I couldn't make anything. So I taught myself how to crochet and it kind of saved me. Baccioli's love for fibers and her desire to promote creative thinking led her to open New Bedford Fiber Arts. The shop is open at 761 Purchase Street and is a cozy and welcoming space filled with brightly colored yarns and other fiber materials. I chose a color palette that I believe gets people excited. It's very brightly colored on the inside. I hope they feel like it's a warm and welcoming environment where they can come back if they need help and just want to hang out and make with me or want inspiration for a new project. The grand opening of the shop is set for January 18 and 19. However, it's open Tuesdays and Wednesdays from noon to 5, Thursdays and Saturdays from 11 to 7, and Sundays from 11 to 4. The shop is closed on Mondays. Baccioli said she plans to expand beyond knitting and crochet and offer all sorts of classes, such as embroidery, felting, spinning, in a space that she is also renting next door to the shop. I want to be a creative hub, focusing on diverse, awesome, and really cool stuff. Fibers exist between a 2D space and a 3D space. They exist between a crafting space and a fine art space, and I want to be able to exist in that between space. Our final front page story, Trump seeks to delay sentencing in New York. President-elect Donald Trump asked a New York judge on Monday to delay his January 10th sentencing on his criminal conviction on charges stemming from hush money paid to a porn star. Trump's lawyers said in a court filing they plan to file appeals on Monday of Justice Juan Merchan's decisions denying Trump's bids to dismiss the case due to presidential immunity and demands of the presidential transition period. The lawyers, Todd Blanche and Emil Bove, asked Merchan to hold off on sentencing Trump while the appeals play out. Any delay would make it unlikely that Trump would be sentenced before his January 20th inauguration. They asked Merchan to notify them by 2 p.m. on Monday whether or not he would delay the sentencing to give him time to appeal his decision if necessary. Merchan set the sentencing date on Friday but signaled that Trump would be unlikely to face jail or other legal consequences. The judge said Trump, 78, may appear at his sentencing either in person or virtually. The case stemmed from a $130,000 payment Trump's former lawyer Michael Cohen made to adult film actress Stormy Daniels to keep her quiet about a sexual encounter she said she had with Trump, who denies it. After a 6-week trial in state criminal court in Manhattan, a jury in May found Trump guilty on 34 felony counts of falsifying records to mask the payment prior to the 2016 election. Trump spokesperson Stephen Chung said in a statement that Trump's victory on the November 5th presidential election showed that the American people wanted an immediate end to the weaponization of our justice system. Trump, a Republican, has long argued that Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, a Democrat, brought the case to harm his re-election campaign. Bragg has said that his office routinely brings felony falsification of business records charges. Bragg's office was planning to file a response to Trump's bid to file a sentencing delay with the court on Monday afternoon. The hush money case made Trump the first U.S. president, sitting or former, to be charged and convicted of a crime. Since the verdict, his lawyers have made 2 unsuccessful attempts to have the case tossed. First, they argued that the Supreme Court's July finding in a separate criminal case against Trump that presidents cannot be prosecuted for official acts meant the hush money case must be dismissed. Marchand rejected that effort in December, writing that the hush money case concerned Trump's personal conduct. After Trump's election win, his lawyers argued that having the case hang over him while he was president would impede his ability to govern. Marchand denied that bid on Friday, writing that overturning the jury's verdict would be an affront to the rule of law. In scheduling Trump's sentencing on Friday, the judge noted that he was not inclined to send Trump to jail. He wrote that a sentence of unconditional discharge, meaning no custody, fine, or probation, would be the most practical approach given Trump's looming inauguration. In their Monday filing, Trump's lawyers said Marchand's intention not to penalize Trump was of no moment. Presidential immunity violations cannot be ignored in favor of a rushed pre-inauguration sentencing. Trump was charged in 3 other state and federal criminal cases in 2023, one involving classified documents he kept after leaving office, and 2 others involving his efforts to overturn his 2020 election loss. He pleaded not guilty in all 3 cases. The Justice Department moved to dismiss the 2 federal cases after Trump's election victory. The lead prosecutor on Trump documents case leaves the DOJ. A lead prosecutor on the criminal case accusing Trump of illegally holding onto classified documents has left the U.S. Justice Department ahead of the president-elect's return to office. That was confirmed by a department spokesman on Monday. Jay Bratt, a senior national security official at the department, who was detailed to Special Counsel Jack Smith's office, retired from the department on Friday. Trump and his allies have vowed to investigate political opponents and others who have leveled allegations of misconduct against him. Bratt, 65, played a pivotal role in the investigation into sensitive national security documents that Trump took to his Mar-a-Lago residence and social club following the end of his first term as president in 2021. The investigation led to a court-approved FBI search of the Florida club in August 2022 and turned up about 100 classified documents and enraged Trump and his supporters. Bratt joined Smith's office when the special counsel took over the investigation and helped secure an indictment accusing Trump of knowingly keeping the documents and obstructing U.S. government attempts to retrieve them. Bratt took the lead in arguing for the prosecution at several court hearings before Florida-based U.S. District Judge Eileen Cannon. Trump pleaded not guilty and argued that the case and other criminal cases against him were politically motivated attempts to damage him and his political movement. Cannon, a Trump nominee, dismissed all charges in July 2024 after finding that Smith was improperly appointed as special counsel. And now, being that we're almost at the midpoint, it's time for obituaries and death notices. We have 3. Edward Bobrowicki, 75, of New Bedford, passed away on January 4th. Arrangements are at the Machinowski Funeral Home. Service time is January 9th at 11 a.m., and the location is the Machinowski Funeral Home. Gloria F.R. Koksurja, 99, of New Bedford, passed away on January 5th. Arrangements are at the Saunders Dwyer Home for Funerals. There is no service time or date, but the location notes that it is private. And finally, we have an obituary for Douglas R. Beaton, 82 of East Sandwich. Passed away on Friday, January 3rd, at his home. He was the husband of Diane L. Winberg Beaton. Born in Middleborough, he was the son of Marjorie and Kenneth Beaton. He graduated from Wareham High School, class of 1961, and received a B.S. in Business from the University of Rhode Island in 1965. He was a resident of Wareham and moved to East Sandwich in 1972. He was a local cranberry grower and served on the board of directors for Ocean Spray for 14 years. He was also president and owner of Eagle Holt Company and director and past president of the Cape Cod Cranberry Growers Association, a member of the Mass Farm Bureau, a 16-year trustee for South Coast Hospital Groups, and a 10-year trustee for Toby Hospital. He became one of the 3 owners of Edaville Railroad in Carver when it reopened for operation, and for 38 years he arranged guided tours of cranberry bogs for 3rd grade students in Sandwich. In lieu of flowers, donations in his memory may be made to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundations, 220 North Main Street, 104, Natick, Mass. 01760-1100, or online at give.cff.org/Massachusetts-Rhode Island/donate, or the Parkinson's Foundation in Miami, Florida. Relatives and friends are invited to visit on Thursday, January 9th, at Chapman Funeral Homes and Cremations in Wareham, 2599 Cranberry Highway, from 4 to 7. His funeral service will be held Friday, January 10th, 2025, at the First Congregational Church, 11 Gibbs Avenue in Wareham, at 10 a.m. Interment will follow in Agawam Cemetery in Wareham. And now, taking a look inside the paper, Trudeau to step down as Canadian Prime Minister. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced on Monday he intends to resign from his post, but will stay until a new leader of the country's Liberal Party is in place, effectively ending 9 years of power. Trudeau's departure comes amid mounting pressure for him to step aside before an upcoming election that his Liberal Party is forecast to lose badly. The leader also has a complicated, oft-adversarial relationship with President-elect Donald Trump, who is set to be sworn in later this month. Every morning I've woken up as Prime Minister, I've been inspired by the resilience, generosity, and the determination of Canadians, Trudeau said. It is the driving force of every single day I have the privilege of serving in this office. The leader's move also comes before an emergency meeting of Liberal legislators planned for Wednesday. Trudeau said at a news conference that Parliament would be suspended until March 24. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election. Trudeau, 53, has been the leader of Canada's Liberal Party for 11 years and Prime Minister of the country for 9. When he took over as Liberal leader in 2013, the party had been reduced to 3rd place in the House of Commons for the first time. Trudeau propelled the Liberals to power in 2015, promising sunny ways, a progressive agenda focused on women's rights and fighting climate change. Calls for Trudeau to step aside have grown since December, and a series of polls showing his Liberal Party being trounced in the next election due to voter anger over high prices and a housing crisis. Trudeau has also faced a series of crises, including the abrupt resignation of Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and Trump's threat of imposing crippling tariffs when he takes office. The Canadian Broadcasting Corp said more than 50 Liberal members of Parliament from Ontario, the most populous of the 10 provinces and the party's stronghold, held a call on December 21st and agreed Trudeau had to step down. Biden urges Americans to never forget January 6th attack. President Joe Biden urged Americans on Sunday to never forget the January 6, 2021 attack on their democracy and to not allow the story of that day to be rewritten. In time, there will be Americans who didn't witness the January 6th riot firsthand, Biden wrote in an op-ed published by the Washington Post. We cannot allow the truth to be lost. Biden's remarks were published on the eve of the fourth anniversary of the January 6th riot, when a mob of Donald Trump's supporters staged an assault at the U.S. Capitol in an attempt to stop Congress from certifying the results of the 2020 election. Trump, who lost that election but refused to admit defeat, encouraged his supporters on the morning of January 6th to march on the Capitol and fight like hell. On Monday, Congress was scheduled to count the state's electoral votes and to certify the votes of the November election, with Vice President Kamala Harris, who lost to Trump in November, presiding over the count in her role as Senate President. For much of our history, this proceeding was treated as pro forma, a routine act, Biden wrote. But after what we all witnessed on January 6th, we know we can never again take it for granted. At least 1,572 defendants have been charged in the attack, according to Reuters, with crimes ranging from unlawfully entering restricted grounds to seditious conspiracy and violent assault. More than 1,251 have been convicted or pleaded guilty, and 645 have been sentenced to prison, with punishments ranging from a few days to 22 years, according to the Justice Department. During his campaign, Trump argued that many defendants were given unfair plea deals under a very nasty system, adding that their whole lives have been destroyed. He referred to January 6th defendants as political prisoners and hostages. At his first 2024 campaign rally, he featured a song by the J6 Prison Choir. That's a group of men imprisoned for their participation in the attack. In an NBC Meet the Press interview that aired last month, Trump said he will begin pardoning rioters in the 2021 attack the moment his second term commences on January 20th, although there could be some exceptions if an individual had acted, quote, radical or, quote, crazy. He did not rule out pardoning people who assaulted police officers, saying they had no choice but to attack the officers. Biden, who leaves office in less than 2 weeks, told reporters at the White House on Sunday that while he is committed to a peaceful transfer of power, Americans cannot pretend that the 2021 attack didn't happen. Speaking specifically of Trump, Biden said, I think what he did was a genuine threat to democracy, and I hope that we are beyond it. Americans, Biden wrote in his op-ed, should commit to remembering January 6, 2021, every year as a day when our democracy was put to the test and prevailed, and understand that democracy, even in America, is never guaranteed. Biden to ban offshore oil, gas drilling in vast areas. President Joe Biden will ban new offshore oil and gas development along most U.S. coastlines, a decision President-elect Donald Trump, who has vowed to boost domestic energy production, may find difficult to reverse. The move is considered mostly symbolic, as it will not affect areas where oil and gas development is currently underway and mainly covers zones where drillers have no important prospects, including the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The White House said on Monday that Biden will use his authority under the 70-year-old Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act to protect all federal waters off the east and west coasts, the eastern Gulf of Mexico, and portions of the northern Bering Sea in Alaska. The ban will affect 625 million acres of ocean. Biden said the move was aligned with both his efforts to combat climate change and his goal to conserve 30% of U.S. lands and waters by 2030. He also invoked the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, saying low drilling potential of the areas included in the ban did not justify the public health and economic risks of future leasing. My decision reflects what coastal communities, businesses, and beachgoers have known for a long time. The drilling off these coasts could cause irreversible damage to places we hold dear and is unnecessary to meet our nation's energy needs. Biden said in a statement it is not worth the risks. Around 15% of U.S. oil production comes from federal offshore acreage, mainly in the Gulf of Mexico. a share that has been falling sharply in the last decade as drilling onshore booms, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. The United States is now the world's top oil and gas producer, thanks to big increases in production from places like Texas and New Mexico, fueled by improving drilling technology and strong demand since Russia's invasion of the Ukraine. The announcement comes as Trump has pledged to reverse Biden's conservation and climate change policies when he takes office later this month. It's ridiculous. I'll unban it immediately. I will unban it. I have the right to unban it immediately, Trump said in an interview on the Hugh Hewitt radio program. During his term, Biden also limited new oil and gas leasing on federal lands and waters, drawing criticism from drilling states and companies. But the Lands Act, which allows presidents to withdraw areas from mineral leasing and drilling, does not grant them the legal authority to overturn prior bans. That's according to a 2019 court ruling. That means a reversal would likely require an act of Congress. That order came in response to Trump's effort to reverse Arctic and Atlantic Ocean withdrawals made by former President Barack Obama at the end of his presidency. Trump also used the Lands Act to ban sales of offshore drilling rights in the eastern Gulf of Mexico off the coast of Florida through 2032. Biden's decision will protect the same area with no expiration. What Jimmy Carter's death teaches us about grief. President Jimmy Carter's death on Sunday was both a shock and an inevitability. Carter entered into hospice care nearly 2 years ago and just made it to 100 years old in October, living just long enough to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris in the presidential election. It's hard, maybe impossible, to think of another American who has done more good for the United States and humanity, according to one ex-user. Another added, "The passing of Jimmy Carter profoundly saddens me. May his soul rest in peace." The news has captivated the nation so much that his death likely feels personal. Maybe he was president when you were born, or when your parents were born. Perhaps you're familiar with his nonprofit, the Carter Center, or his partnership with Habitat for Humanity, or you might just recognize his name from a history textbook. No matter what, you might be grieving. Grief is different for everyone, and experts say mourning someone you didn't personally know, a phenomenon called collective or public grief, is complicated and yet a valid experience. Collective and public grief, as I call it, is always unique in how we attach. That's a quote from David Kessler, a grief expert and co-founder of Grief.com, according to USA Today. This form of grief can be further compounded with the death of a beloved public figure. When people experience sudden loss, they may feel shock, disbelief, confusion, and even denial. Siobhan Moore-Mlaben, a licensed psychologist, previously told USA Today the suddenness of the loss may be too much to process and feel too unreal for a person to immediately grasp. Sudden loss can be more shocking, and people can feel less prepared than they might have with expected loss. Moore-Mlaben added, moreover, it is still hard to prepare for anything that is life-altering, whether a person knew it was coming or not. Many have parasocial relationships with those in the public eye, be it celebrities, politicians, or news anchors. You feel close to them like they're your friend or relative. Just because collective or public grief doesn't match how one might grieve someone close to them, it doesn't make the experience any less real. It's a fascinating thing that people don't realize we can actually grieve people we didn't know. And it doesn't mean we're going to grieve them like our spouse, mother, father, sister, child, but we will grieve them. The deaths of public figures may also serve as opportunities to widen discussions on grief. We have a relationship with death that we don't quite know how to explore as a society. We sort of don't know how to hold it. This has been the New Bedford Standard Times. I'm your reader, Mary. Today is January 7th, 2025. Wishing you good health and a good week, and we'll talk again next week.